Hi everyone, welcome to a new Think Socio video. This is the final video on Plus One Sociology PYQs, and we'll be discussing PYQs from chapters 3, 4, and 5 of part 2. Chapter 3, Environment and Society. Define global warming. State the major effects of global warming. Global warming refers to the long term rise in Earth's average temperature due to increased levels of greenhouse gases. Now, what are these gases? Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, etc., creates a greenhouse effect by trapping the sun's heat and not allowing it to dissipate. What are its major effects? It causes climate change, which leads to melting of polar ice fields, which raises the sea level and leads to submerging of low lying coastal areas and affects the ecological balance. There are chances for greater fluctuations and uncertainty in climates across the world, and it also causes loss of biodiversity. Evaluate the major environmental issues associated with resource depletion. Resource depletion is the using up of non renewable natural resources. Some issues that it can cause include an energy crisis, then water scarcity, destroying of the natural drainage of the landscape, soil degradation, deforestation, and loss of biodiversity habitats, and consequent endangering of many species. We see that rivers have been dammed and diverted, causing irreversible damage to the ecology of water basins, and water bodies in urban areas have been filled up and built upon. The topsoil is also being destroyed due to poor environmental management, which leads to erosion, waterlogging, salinization, etc. All these are major environmental issues related to resource depletion. Examine the impact of genetically modified organisms on our ecology. In genetic modification, we import genes from one species to another and introduce new characteristics. GMOs are organisms whose genetical material has been altered. It is done to shorten the growing time, increase the size of the crops, and increase the shelf life of crops. The ecological impact includes loss of biodiversity, soil and water contamination, pest resistance in crops and superweeds, and also the possible impact on non target organisms. Evaluate the nature nurture debate on environment. The nature nurture debate argues whether individual characteristics are innate or are influenced by environmental factors. Theories and data about environment and society are influenced by the social conditions under which they emerge. The debate examines whether genetics or nature or social and environmental factors, that is, nurture, shape human behavior and attitude towards the environment. Nature argues that human interactions with nature are biologically driven, while nurture suggests that culture, education, and policies influence these actions. Environmental problems can be considered social problems. Explain. How environmental problems affect different groups is a function of social inequality. Social status and power determines people's insulation towards environmental crisis. Even public priorities or interest may serve the interests of particular politically and economically powerful groups. The organization of property and production shapes environmental perceptions and practices. Different social groups stand in different relationship to the environment. They approach it differently. They have varied interests and their ideologies are different, and these generate environmental conflicts. Thus, addressing environmental problems requires changing the environment society relations and changing relations between different social groups. Briefly explain the concept of risk society. Risk society is a concept developed by Ulrich Beck, and it refers to a society where modern advancements have led to a new man made risks that are global, unpredictable, and irreversible. The biophysical processes are already hard to predict and control. In addition, human relationships with the environment have become far more complex. Industrialization has led to expansion and acceleration of resource extraction, and it has affected ecosystems. Now, the new complex industrial technologies and new modes of organization, they require a very sophisticated management system, and this is often fragile and vulnerable to error. And that is why it is said that we are living in risk societies using technologies and products that we do not yet fully grasp. Define ecology and social ecology. Ecology is the scientific study of interactions between living organisms and their environment. It examines how species interact with each other and their surroundings, including ecosystems, biodiversity, and environmental sustainability. Social ecology is a concept developed by Murray Bookchin, and it explores the relationship between society and the environment. It argues that social hierarchies, economic systems, and political structures shape environmental issues. It says that economic, ethnic, cultural, and gender conflicts lie at the core of the most serious ecological dislocations we face today. Chapter 4, Introducing Western Sociologists. Explain Max Weber's concept of social action in the context of interpretative sociology. The focus here is on understanding human behavior through subjective meanings that individuals attach to their actions. The central to this approach is social action. Max Weber defines social action as any action that is meaningful and directed towards others in a social context. So, unlike mere behavior, social action involves interpretation, intention, and response to others. The task of the sociologist is to recover the meanings that is attributed by the actor, and that is why Weber emphasized a systematic form of empathetic understanding, which is known as the Verstehen approach, to enable the sociologist to access the subjective meanings and motivations of social actors, which forms the interpretative sociology. Briefly illustrate the concept of emergent level as explained by Emile Durkheim. Emile Durkheim's concept of emergent level refers to the idea that society is more than just the sum of individual actions. He argued that social structures, institutions, and collective consciousness emerge at a higher level than individual behavior. What are the key aspects to this idea? First is that social facts as emergent properties, that they exist independently of individuals and shape their behavior. Second aspect is collective consciousness, that there exist shared beliefs and values which form a higher level reality and it guides individual action. The third aspect is the irreducibility of social phenomenon, that society cannot be explained solely by psychology or biology, but it has its own emergent properties. Karl Marx says that class struggle was the major driving force to change in society. Do you agree with this statement? Substantiate. Firstly, we will have to explain what is class. People in the same position in the social production process will form a class. Classes are formed through historical processes shaped by changing forces of production and consequent conflicts between already existing classes. When mode of production changes, relations of production changes and conflicts arise between different classes and this is called class struggle. Marx in the Communist Manifesto wrote that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. He said that class struggle was the major driving force of change in society. Now, the nature of class struggle varied in different historical epochs. When society evolved from primitive to modern, there were different oppressor and different oppressed classes. They stood in constant opposition to each other and they didn't engage in conflict all the time. For conflict to emerge, class consciousness was important. What is class consciousness? Class consciousness is the subjective consciousness of their identities and interests. This led to class conflicts and overthrow of dominant or ruling class by previously dominated class, and this is called revolution. So, given favorable social and political conditions, class conflicts culminate in revolutions, and that is how society changes. Differentiate between social fact and social action. Both social fact and social action are key concepts in sociology and they were introduced by Emile Durkheim and Max Weber respectively. There is a difference in their focus and approach to understanding society. What is social fact? Social facts are external, objective structures, norms, values, and institutions that exist independently of individuals but shape their behavior. They focus on how societal structures influence individual behavior and their nature is collective, coercive, and external to the individual. Example would be law, religious beliefs, customs, moral norms, language, etc. Social action by Max Weber, it refers to the actions of individuals that are meaningful and directed towards others. They are subjective and based on individual meaning and interpretation. The types include instrumentally rational, value rational, affective, and traditional. What is ideal type? Ideal type is a methodological tool developed by Max Weber to analyze social phenomena. He used it as a conceptual model that highlights the essential features of a social phenomenon, and it helped sociologists to compare real world cases with a theoretical construct. What are the key features of ideal type? It is abstract and theoretical. It is a tool for comparison. It is not a statistical average, and it is value free. These are the main features of ideal type. Chapter 5, Indian Sociologists. List and explain the features of caste as put forward by G.S. Gure. G.S. Gure, in his work Caste and Race in India, identified six key features of the caste system. First one, caste is an institution based on segmental division. Caste is divided into a number of closed, mutually exclusive segments or compartments. It is closed because caste is decided by birth. Second feature, caste is based on hierarchical division. Each caste is strictly unequal to every other caste. Each caste is either higher or lower than every other one. Now, third feature is restrictions on social interaction, especially sharing of food. There exist certain rules on prescribing what kind of food may be shared between each groups. Fourth feature is that caste also involves differential rights and duties, which are there for different castes. It's not just for religious practices, but for secular life as well. Fifth feature, caste restricts the choice of occupation, which is like caste itself is decided by birth and is hereditary. Sixth feature of caste is that there is strict restrictions on marriage, that there is a prevalence of caste endogamy, that is, marriage is only accepted within the caste. Compare the views of Louis Dumo and M.N. Srinivas on Indian villages. Village has been a lifelong interest of M.N. Srinivas, and his contribution to village studies actually made it a dominant field in Indian sociology. His writings on villages has been of two broad types. Firstly, ethnographic accounts of fieldwork done in villages or discussion, and secondly, historical and conceptual discussions about the Indian village as a unit of social analysis. The debate has been about the usefulness of village as a concept. Louis Dumont says that social institutions like caste were more important than village. He said that villages may live or die, people may move from one village to another, but they carry their social institutions with them, like caste or religion. It actually follows them. So it would be misleading to give importance to village as a category. That is Dumont's opinion. Srinivas held the view that village was a relevant social entity. He said that village had served as a unifying identity and that village unity was quite significant in rural social life. He also criticized the British administrators' idea of village as little republics that were self sufficient and unchanging. He wrote about how village had experienced change and how they were never self sufficient but had economic and political relations regionally. Critically evaluate D.P. Mukherjee's argument on tradition and change in India. Mukherjee said that study of tradition should not just be oriented towards past, but there should be sensitivity to change. According to him, tradition was a living tradition. It maintained its links with the past and also adapted to the present and thus was evolving over time. Tradition means to transmit, and it is kept alive through repeated recalling and retelling of stories and myths. There are three principles of change recognized in Indian traditions, namely Shruti, Smriti, and Anubhava. Shruti and Smriti were periodically challenged. Anubhava or personal experience is the revolutionary principle. In Indian case, it's not personal experience but collective experience. Mukherjee said that the task for a dynamic Indian sociology would be to look for the causes of change which are non economic and very much internal. Thus, for DP, the Indian context, Anubhava and Prem, that is, experience and love, have been historically superior agents of change than reason. Thus, he also talked about resilience of tradition, that is, how tradition actually changed without breaking it. There were repeated cycles of dominant orthodoxy being challenged, the transforming orthodoxy, but they were eventually reabsorbed into this transformed tradition. Summarize the socio anthropological definitions of caste. Social anthropologists defined caste as a hereditary, endogamous, and hierarchical social system primarily found in India. and it is characterized by ritual purity, occupational specialization, and social stratification. Here we are looking at three scholars and their definitions of caste. G.S. Gure defined caste as a rigid system, and it is defined by its six features, that is hierarchy, endogamy, occupational restriction, pollution purity concept, social segregation, and hereditary membership. Louis Dumont considered caste as a hierarchical system. In his work Homo Hierarchicus, he argued that caste is structured around ritual hierarchy based on purity and pollution. M.N. Srinivas looked at caste as a dynamic system. He challenged the rigid view of caste by showing mobility through Sanskritization. He also introduced the concept of dominant caste, which controls land, politics, and resources in villages. Our Plus One Sociology PYQ series have come to an end. So thanks for listening and all the best for your exams.